A Second Chance Christmas. The Christmas Mountain, Clean Romance Series. Book 2. By Melinda Curtis. Second edition. Copyright 2019 by Melinda Curtis. Chapter 1. As a kid from the wrong side of the Tennessee tracks transplanted to Montana, I had a dream about how my life would go. And it went something like this. Get a really cool job that pays a lot of money, wear designer clothes, fall in love with a really handsome, wealthy man, have a wedding that Barbie would envy, and live without ever having to eat another slice of Spam. Ever. At 26, none of that had happened. Oh, I had a kind of cool job as a political strategist, which mostly involved writing speeches for political candidates and incumbents for one of the most successful agencies in Washington, D.C. But I was an underpaid cubicle slave, a speechwriter who had 6 degrees of separation between me and whatever candidate my company was hired to help elect. I was ready for more pay, more responsibility, more of a social life. And I could use a little less spam, the meat, not the virus-laden email. Sadly, living in Washington, D.C., this basement dweller was still on a spam budget, shopping at Goodwill, which had killer deals on used designer duds, the only way to buy, and working long hours with guys even my mother wouldn't date, and she had a low bar. I was all for getting behind a candidate and transforming the world one vote at a time, but something had to change. I needed bigger and better opportunities. I was tired of waiting. It seemed as if I'd been waiting all my life. My mama had always told me to be patient. Wait for the right guy, Lexi, Mama used to say while watching Jeopardy and waiting for the right guy to find her. Last time I called, she was still waiting. My mentor at Columbia University in New York City had always told me to be patient. Ms. Townsend, you aren't going to graduate and run a campaign for a presidential candidate in the same year. Enjoy the journey. Professor Zimbra could afford to enjoy his journey now that he was at the end of the trail and looking at a pot of retirement gold as a consultant and seminar host. Even my standoffish boss at Dunlop Bennett and Associates always told me to be patient. You'll get your chance, Lex, John Bennett had said kindly just last week. We all see what a hard worker you are. And there was the problem. Who cared if I was a hard worker? Everyone at D-Band A was hardworking. They were so hardworking, they couldn't put the last syllable on my first name. From the day I'd walked through the glass doors at D-Band A, I'd been Lex, a nickname I resented. I suppose if my dyed black hair ever fell out, I'd make a great Lex Luthor, supervillain. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and the cubicle dweller across from me, Darcy Lipowitz, my arch rival for assignments and promotions, was eating a slice of pumpkin pie. I should have been thinking about something new for Junior Senator Paul Radner to say to his constituents at a town hall in Cleveland next week. Instead, I was shading in a scribble on a notepad half tucked in a folder on my desk and humming along to the chorus of White Christmas as it drifted back from the lobby. Lexi Townsend, Senior Vice President, soon-to-be partner. I considered making all the dots over the I's hearts, but rejected the idea as too immature. Senior vice presidents might not take the time to dot the I's at all. Lex. John appeared at the corner of my gray, waist-high cubicle wall. He wasn't quite average height, wasn't quite average in the looks department, and had been shorted on the easygoing personality, as well. I slapped my folder closed and smiled like Lexi Townsend, loyal drone to D-Band A. What's up? My boss handed me a small stack of mail without quite meeting my gaze. Are you up for a challenge? Of course. I nearly leapt out of my seat to hug him. I'd been selected to move up in the world. I cast Darcy the friendliest of glances, with only a hint of a triumphant smile. Behind our boss back, Darcy rolled her fake eyelash-trimmed eyes and finished off her pie. John gave a little chuckle. Emphasis on little. You know how Cyrus is always on the lookout for up-and-comers. Not a question. Along with John, Cyrus Dunlop was a founder of D-Band A and our A-list scout. Scouting was our bread and butter, funded by national parties. We caught the little fish, small-town politicians, and hooked them on their swim upstream, to more powerful offices. He found you one. I nodded, wanting to stand like an equal, but in my high-heeled boots, Saint Laurent, a goodwill score, I'd be taller than John. A definite no-no when your boss was height-challenged. I remained seated. I know it's the holidays, but this guy has deep pockets and he's running for office on the lowest rung in your old stomping ground. John smiled as if he'd taught every politician we represented how to turn on the juice. Of course, I thought of you. Old stomping grounds. My breath caught. You need me to go to New York. I'm there. I spoke so fast, a little of my Tennessee twang leaked out, giving my words extra syllables, such that I'm there came out as I'm there. I was too excited to care that I'd slipped. I began a mental flip through my contacts file, searching for anyone I could mooch couch space from. If I could land a little fish and guide his career, mine would be made as well. No. Not New York. John chuckled again. Not New York. Your hometown. Tullahoma. Tennessee. No. Christmas Mountain. My chair bucked like a bronco coming out of a rodeo chute. I gripped the handles and steadied myself. John didn't seem to notice my distress. This guy has everything going for him. Well-educated. Good-looking. Clean record. His great-grandparents were immigrants and made their fortune in the newspaper business. No. Not him. Not him. I made a silent vow to volunteer to ring the Salvation Army bell for donations outside my local grocery store every night for a week, in the snow, in a blizzard, barefoot, if only John wouldn't say. Kevin O'Malley. John grinned broadly. His middle-aged lines emanated from his eyes like the face-framing fans of those little carnivorous dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movies. He's perfect, right? My mouth went dry and I had to swallow twice just to lie and say, right. Kevin O'Malley wasn't perfect. Oh, everyone thought he was. But he was the boy in high school who'd ruined my reputation freshman year. One dance with him and I'd gone from a nobody to an easy body in the eyes of the student body. Hatred for Kevin collected in the back of my throat like the bitter crest of vomit. It might take a miracle to get him elected. I don't believe in miracles. I believe in you. He did the whole finger gun thing, aiming at me. This guy's gonna take you places, John predicted, walking away. We set up a meeting with his team for Friday. Darcy took inventory of my expression, smiled like the Cheshire Cat and disappeared after John, looking for cream. I slid down in my chair until only the crook of my neck kept me from falling to the floor. Kevin O'Malley was the man I was supposed to hitch my career wagon to. I had nothing but bad will for the guy. And that was putting it mildly. I'd daydreamed about Kevin being run over by a bus, getting lost in a snowstorm and freezing to death, being eaten by a pack of feral chickens. Perhaps I should point out that I'd also dreamed of him crawling back to me and professing his undying love, mature, right? Now, I don't own a gun and have never been in a cat fight. Heck, I want world peace. It was just, I also wanted a world without Kevin O'Malley in it. He'd grown up with a silver teething ring and since earning his degree at Duke, he'd been golfing professionally, but somehow always missed the cut for the PGA Tour with the elite golfers. His performance had been almost mediocre this year, sad and yet completely satisfying. It was pathetic that I always checked his golf scores. But hey, I had an excuse. Keeping up with sports was one way for a woman to ensure she always had conversation when working in a man's world. It had nothing to do with our shared past. I stared at the high ceiling, not seeing the single strand of cobweb or the texture near the light fixture that looked like Mr. Magoo's face. Instead, I saw Kevin's handsome teenage mug drawing closer, felt his breath waft over my cheek and his lips pressed gently to mine. I made a sound much like Arnold Schwarzenegger did when a villain stabbed him unexpectedly on screen. Arugo AHR. I slapped a hand over my mouth, eyes darting to and fro to see if anyone had witnessed my meltdown. But no one was in the sea of cubicles this late before the holiday. Kevin O'Malley drove me crazy. If I took this assignment, everyone would know the man was my kryptonite. And the key to surviving in politics was to hide your weakness as long as possible. There was no hiding in Christmas Mountain. The Montana town was too small. I stared at my computer screen and the screensaver of the White House blanketed in snow. Chief of Staff. I blew out a breath. I'd never get more than a tour of the White House arranged by my congressman now. The envelopes John delivered beckoned. I could postpone planning a trip home on the hopes of better news in the Daily Mail. A surprise inheritance from a long-lost uncle. An offer of marriage from a Saudi prince. Heck, I'd welcome a chance to win $1 million from Publishers Clearinghouse. The top envelope had been sliced open neatly. It contained a signed faxed contract from Kevin. His signature was as big and bold as his personality. I dropped it to the farthest corner of my desk. The second envelope was a promotional piece, an invitation to a conference on political strategy at Columbia chaired by Professor Zimbra. I tossed it in the trash, hoping my career wouldn't soon follow. And the final envelope. I recognized the carefully printed letters before it registered who'd penned the note: Miss Melody King, Christmas Mountain's choir teacher and one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. I hadn't heard from her in years. I quickly ripped into the letter. Dear Lexi, I've been thinking about you and your wonderful friends of late. That's what old people do, you know. We think about the past, wishing we could relive the good times and somehow react differently to the bad. I stopped reading and checked the postmark on Ms. King's letter. It was dated before Kevin had signed his contract. If it had been after, I'd suspect her of prepping me for working with Kevin. She knew the truth about the night he'd humiliated me, and it would be just like her to voice her support. The past tried to wrap me in its chilly embrace, but I shrugged it off and returned to the letter. Things have changed here in Christmas Mountain, but you know better than anyone that change can happen in a blink or at a snail's pace. I don't like change. God's truth. Ms. King wanted everything just the way it had been, from the white gardenias blooming in her garden every spring to the peppermint pie she made every Christmas. I need to talk to you. In person. Please come to Christmas Mountain before Christmas. I'm ill, you see. And although I don't want to be maudlin, I may not have much time left. My body went lost in a snowstorm cold. Come see me, Lexi. I always believed in you, my dear. And now, I need someone to believe in me. Sincerely. Miss Melody King. Her letter drifted out of my hands. I hadn't planned on going home for Thanksgiving. And I'd bought Mama a plane ticket to come visit me at Christmas. I'd avoided going back to Christmas Mountain for 8 years because people there believed the worst of me. But Ms. King needed me. I glanced at the White House on my screensaver once more. Maybe this was a sign that I was meant to face my past. Maybe this was a sign that I needed to be patient a little bit longer. Welcome to Christmas Mountain. Population 8001. I read the sign out loud as I drove into town mid-afternoon on Thanksgiving Day. Christmas Mountain was a small town, smaller than ever. Mama had mentioned that people were moving away and things weren't the way they used to be. Did Kevin want to save it? Or was he looking for a way into higher-level politics, as Cyrus seemed to think? Main Street was typical of small towns built 100 or so years ago. That's when a small group of people had decided to settle here on Christmas. They'd whimsically named the mountain Christmas Mountain, the 60-foot waterfall Christmas Falls and the river Christmas River. The buildings were made of brick, the shops tall and narrow. Garland and lights were hung from street lamps and store fronts, prepared for Black Friday shoppers at the. I slowed to read the shop signs. There was an antique store, a florist, a knitting shop and a bookstore. Not exactly a shopper's paradise, nor had it been 8 years ago. I made a left turn by the courthouse, passing the town square and the diner with the path to the falls behind it. There was a pine tree on the square. Its branches swayed in the wind. Used to be, folks in town came together to decorate it and celebrate the beginning of the season with a lighting ceremony. Who knew if that was still a thing? Across the river, down a narrow lane, and I was home. Townsend Manor. I got out, tucking my cell phone in my back pocket. The front porch sagged and was in need of a coat of white paint. The sky blue paneling was dingy and in need of a good power wash. The roof shingles buckled and looked as if a strong storm might lift a few off. Mama came out on the porch to greet me. Unlike the tree in the town square, her shoulder-length bleached blonde hair didn't give an inch to the wind. She wore red satin pumps, a thin green sweater over a push-up bra, and Christmas red lipstick. She was dressed for company, just not mine. Puddin'. She ran down the stairs, spread out her arms, and hugged me tight. I reciprocated. Maisie Townsend was a hot mess, but she was my mama and I loved her. For a moment, I was 7 again, oblivious to the class lines that separated the kids in town, certain that I'd never leave or want to leave Mama or Christmas Mountain. Positive that my southern-tinged accent was something to be proud of in my new hometown. Child, my mother released me and tried to brush my dark locks into submission. If you're gonna dye your hair black and look like the daughter of Satan, the least thing you could do is get yourself a can of Aqua Net. A familiar argument. I grinned. You can always get me a can for Christmas. I'll do better than that. I'll give you one out of my private stock. Mama stored Aqua Net like doomsday preppers stored cans of Spam. She looped her hand in the crook of my arm and hurried up the walk, smiling with spillover dimples. Leave your bags for later. Come on inside and I'll get you something to eat. I had Tommy Lee Perkins over for dinner this afternoon, but that man eats like a bird. Mama, Tommy Lee Perkins was a mooch. Not exactly a man Mama dated, not exactly not. With effort, I stopped myself from falling back into the language of the South and rephrased. I'm going to be working with the O'Malleys. I told you on the phone. The only way I can stay with you is if you take a hiatus from, how to put this politely, entertaining friends. Mama was a bartender at Tinsel and Tonic downtown. She was known for her ability to make a good mixed drink and she'd been known to bring home a man she'd met during her shift. She threw parties and prided herself on having a good time, refusing to have regrets. In fact, she'd never told me who my father was. For all I knew, Pop was moonshine-making Tommy Lee Perkins. What a depressing thought. Nuff said. Now Kevin. Kevin could trace his lineage back to the Mayflower. You can't object to Tommy Lee coming over. Mama's feet slowed as we walked up the porch stairs. Mama. Why did I have to be the parent in our relationship? My career and I need you to behave this holiday season. Behave? She reached the top step, turned, grabbed my hands, and shimmied backward toward the front door with a generous hip sway. Chicka-boom, 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 boom, boom. Mama smiled as if she'd just won $100 on a lottery ticket, which to her was a fortune. I always behave, Puddin'. Just not always the way you'd like. Rock, meet hard place. I was certain I'd been given this assignment because I could stay in the area on the cheap. I didn't want word to get to my stuffy boss that I was cheap by association with the only family I had. If you cared so much about me, Mama said with the slyness of a fox sneaking into a hen coop, you wouldn't abandon me for 9 months at a time. I see you on holidays. Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. She waggled her finger, gray eyes flashing. And you don't tell me what you do in between times. I work. And I will not walk in that door unless you promise me. My cell phone rang in the back pocket of my jeans. I freed one hand, tugged it out and froze. I'd programmed the numbers I'd need here in my contacts, along with an icon for Kevin, but I hadn't called him. The display showed the image of a devil. Kevin O'Malley had my phone number.